Robert Westenberg, welcome to Cultural Attache.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Craig. Appreciate it.
You are playing Neil Diamond now in the first national tour of A Beautiful Noise. You're currently at the Hollywood Pantages through the 27th of July. And then 2 days later, you open up at the Segerstrom Center in Costa Mesa, and then the tour continues. But I want you to tell me about Saturday afternoon at the Pantages.
Oh, yeah, it was a pretty special day. We had a special guest appearance by none other than Neil Diamond, whom I had not yet met. I had only had contact with him via FaceTime on Katie's phone, Katie, his wife, and and so he actually shared my dressing room, which was so I can tell everybody from now on that I shared a dressing room with Neil Diamond because my dressing room is like a suite and has two spaces to it. So at intermission, Neil was snuck out of the house. He was at house right, snuck out of the house and into my dressing room, and I went over to Nick Fradiani's dressing room, who plays Neil then, and used his dressing room for the intermission. So, and then they brought Neil back into the house, and then we continued with the show. But I had still not met Neil. And so at the end of the show, when we normally sing a reprise of Sweet Caroline, as a cast and as the audience joins in with us, Nick went straight down stage and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Diamond." And the audience didn't really know that he was in the house because he was snuck in and snuck out, right? And he was just kind of huddled house right. And and so they were confused, and then three spotlights hit Neil over there in the house, and slowly, and he had a microphone, he started singing, and he can still sing. And it sounds like Neil Diamond. So the entire audience slowly realized, what do you mean Neil Diamond? And we just watched a musical about it, and then they looked and realized, oh my God, it's Neil Diamond. And it was like watching, I don't know, like watching minnows in a stream, and you watch them all kind of flock together, and all of a sudden the entire focus of the audience just shifted over to where Neil was singing, and people started going nuts. I mean, nuts. And then people were crying, and then people in the cast started weeping, and he sang the crap out of it. I mean, where it began. I mean, it was just that deep, beautiful baritone. And yeah, so he sang, and then we slowly started joining him at the end of that, and then we finished the show, and it was a raucous, celebratory moment. Then afterwards, Neil came back to my dressing room, and that's when I first got to meet him. And we chatted and had a great talk, and then it was photo op time, and he was incredibly sweet and generous, had nothing but great things to say about the show, came on stage with us, and we took photo after group shots, individual shots, and he was just patient and kind, and it was amazing.
The only thing I will correct about your story there, if I may, is that you not only can you say that you shared your dressing room with Neil Diamond can say he shared his dressing room with you.
I'll take that.
I figured you might.
Yes.
Now, for those of us who have followed your career for a very long time, and I happen to be one of them, I know that in terms of roles on stage, it seems as though your last stage role prior to joining A Beautiful Noise was as Mr. Darling and Captain Hook with Kathy Rigby in 2009. So,
Yes.
what made A Beautiful Noise the right project for your return to the stage?
Well, it's a good question. I was teaching in Missouri. My wife Kim, whom you may know, she was in Into the Woods with me as well. Um, we've been living in Springfield for the last 20 years, and I didn't want to raise my children in New York City anymore, and so we moved out there, and I started teaching and directing, and I was, living my life there, and then Kathy Rigby came through, and she was performing in Branson, and she asked Kim and I to be in her show, and so we did that for 2 summers, and Kim actually ended up doing the national tour with her in that, and then this was completely out of the blue, Craig. I got an email from Jason Thinger, who is the associate casting director for Jim Carnahan in New York, asking me if I'd be interested in auditioning for A Beautiful Noise for the Broadway production. And I thought, well, oh gosh, so let me talk to my dean about that. Let me talk to my wife about that. And so we decided that it would be worth trying. And so I laid down some tape for him, self-tape, and sent it in. And Michael Mayer, the director, liked it enough to ask me to come to New York for a live audition, and I did. And as it turns out, I didn't know this until later. I got very close, and but Mark Jacoby, an old friend of mine, got the role, and he was amazing. And anyway, they called me right after that, and they said, "Bob, it's not going to work out this time, but we want to keep you in mind for the future." So I said, "Great." And then I didn't hear from them for a year. And then I got a call and they asked me to fly into New York and do a music session with Sonny Palladino. And I did that. And that was ostensibly to take over for Mark because Mark's contract was coming up and they did not think he was going to renew. And as it turns out, he did renew because they found out shortly thereafter that the show was going to be closing in April or May. And I think Mark just decided, well, I'm so close anyway, I might as well finish it out. And so he stayed on with the show, and then they offered me the tour. And so again, long conversation with my wife because it's pretty big commitment away from home and children and grandchildren, and decided that I would probably be beating myself up if I didn't do it. And not to mention the fact that it's an incredibly wonderful show, a wonderful role, and how many roles for people my age come along at this time of life, right? So we decided as a group that it would be a good idea to take it, and so that's how I ended up here.
So the tour is scheduled to run through the summer of 2026. How long do you want to stay with the show?
I've already signed on through the summer of 2026.
So you're having a good time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of considerations there, and one of them is money. I mean, it's the money is fantastic, and the experience is incredibly positive, and the artistic fulfillment is high, and the audience reception is off the charts. And I mean, seriously, how many times do you get to do a job? 8 times a week, you get to bring, a couple of thousand people to that kind of fevered peak of joy and happiness. It's a gift. It's a complete and total gift.
And it's certainly a gift for somebody who has described himself as a Neil Diamond fan
I
yourself.
am. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's been, I mean, what a privilege, what an honor to be able to portray Neil. It's he's been a part of my life, since he first started singing music, and I was a very young person. And therefore his music has a really deep resonance for me because it's, been associated with strong, impactful moments in my life, as many people in my generation feel the same way. So, and I just think he's a musical genius. I mean, he just writes stunning song after stunning song, and songs that are deep and real and memorable and artful. And he's a real sort of, old school songs, the tunesmith. He really knows how to cobble together a beautiful piece of music and lyrics that blend perfectly together. And I just think the world of him. He's a real artist.
Now, the structure of the show is the later in life Neil Diamond, is talking to a therapist about his work at the suggestion of his wife, and he's recounting his life through his songs. So, knowing that you were familiar with the songs, how familiar were you with his own personal journey or even his professional journey through the career that you've come to admire?
Not very, to be honest. And it was only until I got the role that I started digging in, obviously, to do my research. And I had a lot of time between being cast and actually starting rehearsals. So yeah, I did a lot of YouTubing and a lot of reading and found out, just the sensational arc of his career and the ups and the downs and the film part of it and the writing incidental music and composition music for film and it's just it was an eye opener, and I think that especially in terms of the breadth of it and the variety of it, and seeing how the book contextualizes that music and allows you to see not only what part of Neil's life that song emerged from, but also what were the emotional, situational influences that created that piece of work, how that piece of music emerged from that particular crucible of his life at that particular time. So I just think that just from a geeky educational point of view, in terms of an audience member watching, oh, it's so cool going, oh, that's how that happened, and that's why that happened, and that's that's a reflection of that aspect of his life. It's fun from that to see all the pieces of the puzzle come together in the play.
Did that renew or energize your respect for who he is and what he's accomplished with his life?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh yeah, yeah. And and also understanding the ever-present melancholy that lies at the core of a lot of his music, and the need to confront that and to perhaps purge it and to learn how to live with it or through it, and finally going to a therapist to take care of that part of the soul that needed healing. And that's why I think to be honest with you, it's ostensibly a jukebox musical in that it uses an existing catalog of songs, and it retrofits them with scenes to try to make the songs make sense and all of that. But it's so beautifully crafted and so seamless, and it's just a jewel box in terms of structure. And when you get to the end of the musical, it's a very unexpected journey that is taken at the end. And it's not something that is normal to jukebox musicals. It transcends that genre in terms of its depth, in terms of its power, and surprise. There's a long, long scene at the end of this musical. It's like, what is this? How brave is that to write a book scene like that at the end of a musical, and to have it hold water? That the tension in it is almost unbearable, I think, and there's a catharsis at the end of it. And I mean, that's a lot to ask of a musical, especially of a jukebox musical, and I think that it succeeds beautifully in doing so.
Which I think is a much braver and more interesting tack than to say just to finish a jukebox musical with a faux concert for 15 minutes so that
Right,
everybody
right.
thinks they've seen the real act. We don't have to say what that musical is, but we all know what it is.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think, apropos of that, with this particular musical, it's an origin story, it's a memory play, it's a psychotherapy session, an intense psychotherapy session, and it's a Neil Diamond concert. But it's all organically interwoven into this narrative that makes it all make sense, and it doesn't feel contrived, I think. So I just think that it's a little work of art.
Now, when you take on a role like this, and I'm not an actor, and anybody who's ever seen me attempt to do it will vouch for that description. When you're taking on the role of somebody who is so beloved and so well known and has a unique singing style, how important is it for you to emulate what later Neil Diamond sounds like, and how much room is there for you to bring you to that?
It's a great question. I think all of that depends on the actor that you cast, the director who's directing the play and their vision of it, and what the expectations of that particular piece create. Um, so I I'm not an impersonator. I'm not, you know, I have a little bit of mimicry skills, but that's not what this play is about at all. So I was just personally interested in capturing the essence of what the book is about, what the scene is about, what the internal conflict is about, and the emotional journey that this particular character has to take. And when I say particular character, of course, I'm referring to Neil, but I'm also referring to the character that I embody in the play. So I have to bring me to that role. And they cast me for the audition when I did the audition, I didn't do any Neil Diamond impersonations. I didn't try to sound like Neil. I was just Bob. And they cast me in the role. So I thought, well, that's an indication that my particular naturalism is good enough, right? And so then when I got into rehearsal, Nick Fradiani, who's playing Neil then, is he'd been doing it on Broadway for a long time and all alone for like the last year. So I thought it was wise for me to watch Nick and to see his bearing and see his, his demeanor, his sensibilities, his vocal timbre, his see just it's just gently coax myself into that world so that there would be a believable thread between this young man and this old guy, and that that young man could have evolved into this person. And fortunately, Nick and I are very close. We're almost exactly the same height. We have same physicality, and so that was extremely helpful in terms of helping me believe that could happen. So that was most of the process in terms of my acting of sort of a gentle meld with Nick, who had done his research in terms of Neil, right? And so I just built on that particular foundation and tried to make it organic between the two of us.
Now, Nick would be a very blessed individual if he is able to have a 5 decade career like you have had. Um, so let's talk a little bit about some of those other projects that you've been involved with. And because the first show I saw you in was Sunday in the Park with George,
Oh
I
my gosh, you're going back.
I am going back, but I mean that show, like the older I get, the more impactful that show becomes. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know if you have any theory as to why, as we get older, that show becomes more meaningful.
Well, I think that, that's true of really good works of art. I think that works of art that mature well with age, that the resonance of them is not, parochial in terms of a particular subset of an age range. So I think Sondheim, I did a lot of projects with Sondheim, and he was a genius, for goodness sake. And with that particular project, I took over the role of George because I was in the show. I played Alex and the soldier in the original cast. And then when Mandy left, I took over the role of George. And when I had did the put-in rehearsals, Steve and James Lapine would come to the put-in rehearsals, and then Steve and I would go back to my dressing room after the rehearsal and talk for about 45 minutes. And I had about four of these sessions with Steve. I wish I could have recorded them. I mean, I wish I could have recorded, but I had a good relationship with Steve. We became friends, and he taught me a lot. But one of the things that he said we're talking about a particular moment, and he was talking about the need for specificity, the absolute critical need for specificity, and how when he writes, he always writes from the specific. So it's always about the small details of a character or a scene, the textures, whatever it is that make it visceral for him and allows him to find the fertile ground that he needs to create. And then he said it's from the specific that we get to the universal, not the other way around. So he said, and because of that, because he's so specific about everything he writes, every line, every image, every note, because he paid attention to the details, that's where I think we kind of it's a portal into the universal. It's like when you see, a beautiful work of art by, I don't know, Renoir or Rembrandt or something like that, and you see something in it from hundreds of years ago, but you see one small gesture that you recognize as something, oh, that's something I do, or that's something that my Aunt Mary does, right? And all of a sudden it humanizes that piece, and it makes it so that the distance between you and them in terms of time completely disappears, and it's just another human being. That kind of specificity is in Steve's work, and I think that that's in Sunday in the Park with George, and that's why I think as you get older, it continues to speak to us that the universal is so present in that play that it's talking about things so much larger than itself, so much larger than art. It's talking about aging and death and infinity and legacy, and there's so many things that touch all of us that become more important as we grow older and more aware of as we grow older. that I think that that's why that play resonates more deeply as you age. Anyway, that was a long-winded answer, so
No,
I'm
but
sorry.
it was terrific, and it made me think a lot through it. You know, it was interesting when I saw the Manny A. Chocolate Factory revival that opened on Broadway, which was the first Broadway revival of the show. You know, a friend said, "You've got to go see it." She had seen it first. She didn't tell me I was going to be weeping through the entirety of the show. And it's
Yeah,
like, that was just, it shocked me that I had that kind of response. And I'm one of those people who always loved the second act. Like, I think the second act is remarkable. And I know other people said the show should have stopped at the end of the first act. And I
people
completely,
said the same thing about Into the Woods.
same thing about Into the Woods. And
Yeah.
again, Into the Woods, second act to me is far more interesting than the first act.
Mhm. Right.
Um, but that's in both of those, that's where the life lessons come in. But I was so surprised that I had that kind of deeply emotional response to the entirety of the show. And I
Right.
can't imagine what it would be like seeing it now that he's passed away. I think it would just magnify all of that.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Um, okay.
since you brought up Into the Woods, which I also saw you in, um, did you have a sense when you were doing that show that it would become probably Sondheim's most produced and most popular show?
No, no, it was just another show. It was just another show that we're doing on Broadway that we thought is as ephemeral as anything else that we've ever done. And once we finish it, it'll be forgotten or it'll be, you know, remembered by a bunch of theater geeks who hold on to the original LP and have a signed copy. But because it was, first of all, it was recorded by PBS. That's important because that became a touchstone for several generations to research the show, to get familiar with the original production. And then there's the again the universal nature of it and the fact that high schools, it's a perfect show for high schools. It was his most successful show, and one of the reasons is that high schools can do it, and it's it deals it deals with myth. It deals again archetypes. It deals with universals. It deals with things that resonate. Fairy tales. I mean, that the whole essence of fairy tales is just something that's like in the core of our being. That every culture in the world has their own version of that. You know. And they speak, they're very Jungian. They speak to our subconscious. They're our collective subconscious, you know. So I think that play hits people on a level they don't even realize when they're watching it, and that the realization of how deep it's hitting them increases as they get older in terms of how deep that pool really is, you know?
It's, you know, with Sunday in the Park with George, I didn't get to see the off-Broadway version at Playwrights Horizon. I only saw it once it was at the Martin Beck. I believe it was no, it was a booth. It was a booth theater for Sunday in the Park with George. With Into the Woods, I got to see it in San Diego before it transferred to Broadway. And I know that there were some fairly substantial changes made in the show from what was presented in San Diego to what was on Broadway at the Martin Beck. But you were there and you got to have a front row seat to see how Sondheim and Lapine worked on trying to improve the show and make things work to the best that they possibly can. What was that like?
Well, yeah, so I was not at the workshop in San Diego. I only joined it, my wife was, Kim Crosby, but um, I did not join it until the Broadway production. So I had, because I had worked with Steve and Jim in Sunday in the Park with George, I knew how they, and also Paul Gemignani. We have to talk about Paul in that triumvirate because he's critical in terms of the development of that material. But what was so cool for me as a young actor when I did Sunny in the Park, and that was what, 1984? So I was 30, 31 years old, you know. Um, it was watching Steve and Jim throw things away, throw things up. And you know, you have to remember too, we were we were getting ready for the Broadway opening of Sunny in the Park with George, and there were songs that hadn't been written yet. Okay, so bookmark scenes that were written by Lapine and saying song inserted here, basically. And so, but we had you know, this little connective tissue, piece of connective tissue that got us from A to B to C to D, which represented what the song was going to be, the essence of what that song was going to be. And so here we're in preview in New York, and 4 songs had not been written for Act Two. Previewing, right? And so it was, and people were walking out of the theater before we finished our curtain call. They were streaming out. And Steve, we would have a meeting after Steve come and say, "Don't worry, don't worry, it's gonna be okay. I've been through this before." So you you should have seen West Side Story. That was a mess. So the great thing about Lapine and Sondheim is it was all about the process, and he was so supremely confident in who he was and what he was doing that he knew he could do this, and also he knew that he worked really well under pressure. That's when he created some of his best stuff. So slowly through the process of preview, a song would be written, it would be learned by the actor, it would be staged by Lapine, and then it would be put in that night. Okay. And then refined as you got it on its feet. But it was like we were at Playwrights, or we were at, I don't know, somewhere in, Iowa, working on a show. But we're on Broadway. And then slowly it's like, oh, not as many people are leaving at intermission or for the curtain call. And then the second song, and then the third song, and then the fourth song, and all of a sudden the act took shape right before we opened. Okay, and there was when it crystallized, when its final form started to crystallize, that's when the audience started to resonate and reverberate and started to have its its intended effect on the audience. So so I was used to that sort of running by the seat of your pants kind of feeling. So when we were in Into the Woods, the same thing was happening. I mean, I walked in one day, this is preview on Broadway. I walked in one day and I was given a piece of paper and they said, Lapine wants to see you on stage. He said, we're taking out the Wolf song and we're you and Danielle Furland, who played Little Red, are going to do this scene instead. He said, we're not going to sing a song? And they said, no. I said, okay, right? And because I worked, you go, okay, well, we'll do that, right? And so Danny and I learned the scene. Lapine blocked it, and we did that for like 3 nights. There was no Wolf song. And then Lapine, then I would come to me personally, said, the Wolf song's back in. So, okay, we'll do that. And Steve said to me later, he said, I thought we're doing a show about fairy tales and we got a wolf in there and the wolf doesn't sing a song. That's nuts. No, we'll put the song back in. So it's okay. If that's your logic, I'll go with it and I get my song back.
Which was Hello, Little Girl, right?
Kind of tinkering with the structure of it, throwing things out, putting things in, that was happening all the way through. And we delayed the opening, and I may be wrong on this, by something like 4 weeks. A huge amount of time. We were supposed to, we have your 10 out of 12s, you have your first preview, and it's usually about 2 weeks between your first preview where you open on Broadway, maybe 2 to 3 if you're lucky. It might be a little bit different now, I'm not sure. But we kept saying, no, extend it, and extend it. And we were finding in the 6-week range of previews before I think the New York Times finally said, no, we're coming in. I don't care what you say, we're coming in to review it. It's time. But the reason for that was that he was still workshopping it. And finally, we got that, what is quote unquote the final form, and that was it. So anyway, working with them was delightful and scary, but you just had to trust them.
Would you want to work like that again?
Oh, absolutely. No, I enjoy that. I do. I also, when people look at musicals now, or they look at the final version of a show. Let's say people who are not really in theater. and they look at a final version of the show, and it feels like, oh, that's it. It was fully blown out, right? It came out that way. They wrote that, and then they staged it, right? They don't realize the 5 year period of development that went into that. And then, the 2 years of workshopping it and throwing this out and throwing that, blah, 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 blah. And all the songs that were written that were never used, and to fully realize this material as powerfully as possible. I mean, I worked with Lucy Simon on Secret Garden. And when I was in Into the Woods, they asked me to come out of the show for 2 weeks to do a workshop of it up in Syracuse, New York. I'm not sure. It was a university. I forget which one it was. And Kim played Lily and I played Archie in this workshop version of it. And Lucy wrote 14 songs in 2 weeks for that show. Right there, while we were there, that had not been written before. She had some written already. And then she wrote like 14 songs while we were there. And she threw out, I think, 12 of them. Right? But that's how she worked. She just blurted music. It just poured out of her. And then she started editing later and throwing things out and refining later. And which is a good way, healthy way to work. And it really, helps you tap into subconscious and things like that. So people don't realize how much they're not seeing when they see a show, right? How many scenes were written that didn't make it? How many lines that were thrown out? How many songs that were thrown out? How many songs that were completely revised? How many, it's as Tennessee Williams said, play isn't written, it's rewritten. It's just continuously poured over and revised and refined.
Absolutely. Since A Beautiful Noise is a memory play, I want to try a little memory play about you.
Okay. Probably fail because I have a terrible memory. Go ahead.
Well, I'll see if I can jog your memory a little bit. When you were playing Conrad in Bye Bye Birdie, or Zeppo in Minnie's Boys, or Billy Bigelow, in Carousel
at your research, I can't believe it.
At Good Company Players in Fresno, what expectations?
I'm going there next week, by the way. I'm visiting Fresno next Monday.
Oh, great. What expectations did you have for your career?
I don't know. I think I was a kind of a sort of a rambling idiot. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea. And the idea of making a living at it, I don't know if it actually crossed my mind. I did it because I was having fun. I started out I had a whole bunch of majors and that are not even worth talking about. And then I sort of ended up backing into theater, and I liked it. I enjoyed it, and it was fun. It was a great way to meet girls. It had a great social life to it, and it was a great sense of community to it, and it was just really fun. And so I just ended up sort of, again, backing into it and taking, I think I'll take that course. Oh, theater history, that sounds like fun. And then slowly but surely, I started having more theater credits than English credits. I was an English major. And then I thought, well, after a while, I was like, well, if I want to graduate before 8 years are up, I might as well, I have to make a decision here. And so I thought, well, I'll go with theater because I'm having a gas. I had no idea. And then it wasn't until the end of, with graduation was coming up, I went, well, what am I going to do here? And so I thought, somebody said, well, you need to audition for some graduate programs. Oh, they have those graduate programs? Yeah. Oh, okay. What are they? Well, Juilliard, NYU, Yale. So they started naming all. So I auditioned for like 3. I mean, seriously, 3. I should have auditioned for 40, but I auditioned for 3. And by the grace of God, I got one. I got ACT, American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. So I did my 3 years there. And that's when I really started taking it seriously. That's when I started really digging down into technique, sustainability, artistry, personalization. Denzel Washington was in my first year class at ACT. So I realized I was in a special place. And that was also confirming. It was an endorsement of a potential. And so that was the first time I started thinking about, oh, maybe I can make a living at this. And then when I graduated from there, I was Arena Stage contacted me. I went to the TCG auditions and to the league auditions, which were our version of a showcase, because they didn't really have showcases back then, except for the league, which was the 10 top schools in the country at the time. And got a lot of responses from both of them and agent offers. And Zelda Fitzchandler and her representative contacted me and flew me out to DC to audition for Arena Stage. I probably never would have gone back east if Zelda had not done that. And because I was a California guy, right? And so I flew out there, I auditioned for them, I got cast in their season. I ended up working there for almost 4 years and bouncing between DC and New York. And so that's when I first started making my living at it, you know?
It sounds like you made the right choice not to continue at the seminary.
You know about the seminary as well. Yes, and that's the first place that I did theater. A gentleman that was there when I was at the seminary named Michael Olich, who eventually went on to become a professional set designer, a set and costume designer, I think. Or maybe it's just costume. I think Michael was just costumes. Anyway, I don't want to get it wrong. But Michael was directing a play at the time. I'd never been in a play in my life. I'd never sung in my life. And I was in my second year of college. And Michael directed a play called Child's Play. It's a macabre murder mystery that was on Broadway that takes place in an all-male institution. Okay, so there was a certain irony there. And he asked me to build his set because I had carpentry skills. I'd been building homes in Fresno, California for a couple of summers for a friend. And so I was building his set, and then while I was building his set, Michael came up to me and said, you know, would you consider auditioning for the play? I said, well, what? He said, yeah, here, read this part, come to my room. And so I did it, and he cast me. So that was the first play I ever did. A non-musical in a all-male seminary about an all-male institution murder mystery. And I didn't think twice about it afterwards. Seriously. And then when I left the seminary shortly thereafter and went back to Fresno and went to Fresno State, I was an English major, as I said, and they were casting. I missed all the auditions, and they were casting Death in the Salem. It was a master's degree project for one of the students, and Dennis Frost was his name, and and that was the only play that was having auditions. And I thought, well, you know, since I'd done that one play, why not? On a lark, I thought, I'll audition for that. Well, I got the role of Biff. And so that was my toehold into the department. And then the next thing I know, I'm doing musicals and I could sing a little bit. And so I started doing a lot of musicals as well as things like that. And I had a wonderful, wonderful performance opportunities at Fresno State. I mean, incredible. So, yeah, I was in the seminary.
So to finish our little memory play of you and our conversation, now that you're 50 years into your career as an actor and also as a director, what thoughts do you have looking back on those 50 years, those 5 decades, and what do you want at least the next 5 to 10 years to be like?
You didn't say in the next 5 to 10 decades. Why didn't you say that?
Because I'm practical.
I
don't plan to be around I don't plan to be around decades.
Okay, Kim and I always say we're at the midpoint of our relationship right now. We're now 37 years into our relationship. So we're right at the midpoint.
I like that optimism.
Yeah, it's really optimistic, isn't it? I don't know if I'm that particularly reflective in that sense. I don't dwell on the past very much. I don't have a lot of memorabilia in my house. I don't have pictures of me on the walls. I don't have an awards, trophy case. I don't have any of that. And I didn't want my children growing up with that. Do you know what I mean? Looking at pictures of dads. There's kind of something sad about it. I don't know. I didn't want to do it. So I don't know if it's a flaw or not. Once the past is past, it's past. And I try to build on it and learn from it, but I don't dwell on it. And the present is more important to me and the future is important to me, but present most important. And especially in terms of acting, because I think that's the hardest thing to do in acting is to be present, is to be to be there right then, right now, not yesterday's performance, not tomorrow's, just really being there, really listening, really responding to what's happening around you. And I think that that's an art form and a skill that takes decades to develop. So I feel really privileged that that I'm still working, and that I can still work on my craft, that I can still, try to become really good at what I do, and bring, a bit of authenticity to the stage, because I know that I've seen a lot of theater, and I've seen a lot of inauthentic theater on stage, and it's frustrating because it's what kills theater. I'll say that this particular show has been incredibly rewarding because of the responses that we get. I mean, people come back both during the show and after the show, talking about how powerful the show was to them and how moving it was to them, and thanking us for the collective effort that happened, and how surprised they were and how moved they were. And I thought, well, that's why we go to the theater, isn't it? We go to theater to feel human again. We go to theater to feel again, to be impacted, either with delicious, delirious joy, or unbearable pain for cathartic purging, or whatever it is. We go there to feel that communion of spirit that makes us all human. And I think this play does that. And it's a jukebox musical, for God's sake, and yet it goes to a very, very rich, fertile, dark, joyful place. And I just feel like the luckiest guy around to be able to be. I'm 71 now, and to still be able to do it. I know a lot of people my age are, they're not even ambulatory, so I've got that to be grateful for, and the fact that I get to, dress up every night, put a wig on and a microphone, and go out and pretend to be somebody else, and have it be contributing to this beautiful, beautiful group effort with this unbelievably gifted cast. I mean, it's a genuine privilege.